Today we're going to talk about how to find slope. Slope is defined as rise over run. And what that means is we're talking about how steep a line is. How steep a line is. And you usually use the variable m to show that you're talking about slope. There's three different ways that we're going to talk about how you find slope. And the first way we're going to find slope is when we're looking at a graph. So when we find the slope from a graph, we're going to count from the leftmost point. We're going to start with the point that's on the left, and then we're either going to count up, which is going to be a positive number, or we're going to count down, which will be a negative number, and that's going to be our rise, which is the numerator of our fraction. Then we're going to count from right or left. So if you're talking about a positive number, you're going to go right. If you go left, it's going to be a negative number. That's going to be your run. That's how slope is defined, as rise over run. So let's look at some examples. So the first thing I want you to notice before we even actually figure out what the slope is on this first example, notice as you look at the line from left to right, it's falling. So since that's falling, we should know before we even figure out what our slope is that it's going to be a negative number. It's going to have a negative slope because it's falling as you look at that graph from left to right. So now we're actually going to figure out what our slope is. And remember, for slope we use the variable m. That indicates that we're trying to find slope. And once more, slope is defined as rise over run. So we're going to start with the leftmost point, which in this case is going to be this top point. Notice that there's 2 points that we can see here on the graph. So we're going to start with this top point, and we're going to count how many spaces it takes us to go down to the other point. So we're going down 1, 2, 3 spaces. So that's our rise. That goes on the top in the numerator of our fraction. Then we're going to count to the right to get to that point. 1, 2, 3. And so when we went to the right, that's a positive 3. So our slope is defined as rise over run, so negative 3 over 3, which is actually negative 1. And if you look, each time you go down one spot and one to the right, you would be on that line. Down one space and to the right, you would fall on the line. So for our second example here, before we even count our slope, notice as you go left to right, this line is rising. It's going up. So before anything, we should know that that's going to be a positive slope before we even count. So we'll start with our leftmost point again, but this time it's going to be this bottom point. So slope, we use the variable m. So we're counting up how many spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we went up 5 spaces, that's our rise. And then for our run, we're going 1, 2, 3, 4. That doesn't simplify, so that means our slope is 5/4. So each time we would go up 5 and right 4, that would give us another point on that graph. So now we're going to talk about how you find slope when you're looking at an equation. So when you're trying to find your slope from an equation, you're going to use slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. And in that equation, m, once again, stands for your slope, and b stands for your y-intercept. Okay, and notice that this is once your equation is solved for y equals mx plus b. So m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. Okay, so let's look at some examples. And in these examples, what we're trying to do is find the slope and the y-intercept. So example 1, we have y equals negative 5/2 x minus 4. So this is our slope-intercept form. So just to remind us, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So in this first example, this is already in slope-intercept form. It's solved for y. So the first thing we're going to do is find our slope, which is our m. And your slope is always going to be the number that's in front of x once the equation is solved for y. So that's going to be 5/2. Then we're going to find our y-intercept, which is b. And the y-intercept is whatever you're adding or subtracting from the equation once it's in slope-intercept form. So in this example, our y-intercept would be -4. Okay. Example 2, we have y equals -x plus 2. So once again, this one's already in slope-intercept form because it's solved for y. The slope is going to be the number that's with your x. So the number that's in front of it, the number you're multiplying it by, which in this case is a negative. So that just means that our slope is going to be -1. And then the y-intercept is whatever you're adding or subtracting, which in this case is going to be a +2. So our y-intercept is 2. All right, and then we have one last example. Well, in this last example, this equation's not in slope-intercept form. So we have 2x plus 3y equals 9. So that means we're going to have to solve this equation for y first to put it in slope-intercept form. So we're going to subtract 2x. That way your 2x's will cancel out. So we'll have 3y equals 9 minus 2x. And then we're going to divide by 3. So we'll have y equals, and we want this to be in slope-intercept form, so we're actually going to divide it out. So 9 divided by 3 is going to give us 3. Then on the other side, this -2/3, well, 3 won't go into 2. So we're going to leave that -2/3. That one has our x. So if we change this around and put our x first, -2/3 x plus 3, now that's in slope-intercept form. So we can say our slope is the number that's in front of our x once it's solved for y. So our slope in this example is -2/3. And our y-intercept is whatever you're adding to it, which in this case would be +3. The last way that we're going to find slope is when we are given 2 points. So the formula for finding slope when given 2 points is going to be m equals, which is your slope, y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So all that means is that you have 2 y's and 2 x's. Those are not exponents. This is y sub 2 minus y sub 1, which means you have 2 y's. On the bottom, your denominator, x sub 2 minus x sub 1, just means you have 2 x's. So you're going to label your points, because they're going to give you 2 ordered pairs, 2 points, and then you're going to plug those numbers right into the formula, and then just simplify. Okay, so let's look at our last 2 examples. So once again, our formula is just m equals, for slope, y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Remember, that represents rise over run. Rise is going to be your vertical axis, which is why your y's are in the numerator. Run's your horizontal axis, which is why the x's are in the denominator. So example 1, we have 2 ordered pairs, -1, 2, and 0, -5. So this is an x and a y, and an x and a y. That's what every ordered pair is. The x is first, the y is second. So to find the slope, we're going to say m equals, and we're just going to subtract our 2 y's in the numerator. So our y's are 2 minus, that's the formula, our other y, which is -5. In the denominator, we're going to have our x's. Same order, -1 minus, that's the formula, 0. So now we're just going to simplify that. So in the numerator, 2 minus -5, that's a +7. In our denominator, -1 minus 0, which is a -1. We're going to simplify this. 7 divided by -1 is just -7. So that means if we were to graph this, that means we would have a line that's falling. So now if we look at example 2, we have -2, -2, and 1, 1 as our 2 ordered pairs. So same thing, we're going to start by labeling them, x, y, and then x, y. Every ordered pair is x, comma, y. So to find our slope, we're going to subtract our y's on top. That's our rise. So our first y is -2, minus, that's the formula, the second y is 1. And then in our denominator, we'll have our x's, which is negative 2, subtract 1. Those are our x's as well. So if we come back and look at our y's, so now we're just simplifying. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. Our denominator, we're going to do the same thing. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. And then we're just going to simplify. So if we divide this out, negative 3 divided by negative 3 is positive 1. So that's our slope. Which means if we were looking at a graph, that our line would rise as we go left to right.